At this moment, I rise to support and place further emphasis on the matter that there should be equal repercussions for both men and women accused of domestic violence. Although my most worthy yet misguided opponents seek to create an impression that allows and furthermore supports the opposition of what we stand for today, I urge you to permit me to shift your thinking to a different realm. Madam Moderator, it is in so doing I wish to outline the issues that both men and women should be dissuaded from being abusive towards each other, and there exists the same level of psychological abuse inflicted on the children of the household, whether the perpetrator of abuse is male or female, so it is necessary for the punishment to be equal. What is abuse? What are the classifications of abuse? What are the effects of abuse? The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines abuse as an improper or excessive use or treatment, language that condemns or vilifies, usually unjustly, intemperately, and angrily. Also, physical maltreatment. After sitting here and listening to such a horrific and dehumanizing definition, how dare my opponents seek to prove that such behavior doesn't necessarily deserve equal legal repercussions. Conforming to an article released by the American Psychologists Association, there are 6 key classifications of abuse, namely verbal, psychological, physical, sexual, neglect, and hate crimes. The American Psychologists Association went further by stating that any person who has fallen prey to abuse will never forget the experience and will inevitably develop a general fear. My worthy opponents, domestic violence can affect anyone of any age, creed, or gender. Whether it's physical or psychological, domestic abuse is destructive for both the battered and the batterer. Its tendency to be passed down through generations makes it all the more important that we develop effective methods for combating the effects of abuse. Both men and women should be dissuaded from being abusive towards each other, and so the punishment has to be equal so that both parties are equally reluctant to face criminal charges. The system needs to be set up so that domestic violence is eradicated based on strict penalties. The World Health Organization released an article on the 13th of March 2016 highlighting the issue of domestic violence and equality by stating that the majority of those arrested for domestic violence are heterosexual men. However, between 5 and 15% of those arrested for battering are women. While women can be the initial aggressors, female abusers are rarely identified or studied. Thus, most theoretical and practical work on domestic violence, as well as the policies and controversies that are discussed on a worldwide scale, assume the male batterer, female victim paradigm. Honorable judges, according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, retributive justice is a theory of justice which holds that the best response to any level of breach of law is a proportionate punishment inflicted for its own sake rather to serve an extrinsic social purpose such as deterrence or rehabilitation. Do you really think my opponents possess the authority to challenge and undermine the laws of the land by means of their overemphasized and disproportionate findings and conclusions? In order to move forward as a God-fearing and law-abiding Commonwealth nation, we as a people should uphold the principle of equal punishment for both male and female abusers. My worthy opponents, it cannot be achieved any other way. Lastly, members of the audience, let's take a look at the psychological impact of domestic violence. In accordance with the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, witnessing violence in general has been associated with emotional, behavioral, and learning problems in children, with children's susceptibility affected by developmental level, chronicity of exposure, physical closeness to the incident, and the emotional closeness to the victim. On the basis of those parameters, one may conclude that witnessing violence between parents is a particularly insidious event. It is most likely to occur in the home, the one environment generally associated with the safety and protection of that child. Honorable judges, let me point you to some concrete evidence that shows that wherever penalties for domestic violence are unjust, the crime is perpetrated more rampantly. The American Psychologists Association surveys on the Children's Depression Inventory and the Youth Self-Report randomly identified 110 Israeli children from lower-class families through social records. Their findings showed that 33 of the children had been physically abused by their parents within the last 6 months. 16 had witnessed spouse abuse. 30 had been both witnesses and victims of domestic violence. Israelis were specifically targeted because they resided in a state where the penalties for domestic abuse were unjust and unequal. My worthy opponents, did you hear that? Out of 110 children, 30, and I repeat, 30 had been both witnesses and victims of abuse. Overall, domestic abuse, where inequality is concerned, had effects on child development that varied in magnitude and nature, depending on the type of abuse they faced. Ladies and gentlemen, whether the perpetrator of domestic abuse is male or female, the psychological effect on children is the same. So how then can the repercussions not be the same? Before I leave you today, let me remind you that a real man or woman doesn't love or vent through abuse, beatings, or verbal assault. And my worthy opponents, if they do, the legal repercussions must be and should always be the same. Thank you.